Long before dogs slept beside human beds, their ancestors watched our fires from the darkness, close enough to smell food, but far enough to survive. To an Ice Age hunter, a wolf was not a companion. It was a rival with sharper senses, greater endurance, and jaws built to kill. Yet that predator would eventually become the animal most deeply woven into human life. The transformation was not planned. It began almost by accident. Today, dogs guide the blind, detect explosives, guard livestock, find missing people, and somehow still fear the sound of a vacuum cleaner. But none of this began because humans decided to invent a pet. It began when certain wolves made one profitable decision. They moved closer. Between 20 and 40,000 years ago, humans crossed frozen landscapes in small groups, following prey and surviving from one uncertain hunt to the next. Food was unreliable. Winters were lethal. Injuries could end a life. Yet every campfire created something rare in nature, a predictable source of leftovers. Bones, skin, organs, and scraps gathered near human camps. To a hungry wolf, the edge of the firelight was dangerous, but it also smelled like opportunity. The most aggressive wolves probably came too close and were killed. The most fearful stayed away and received nothing. But some behaved differently. They were cautious without being terrified, curious without being reckless. They watched and learned how near they could approach without provoking an attack. That difference in temperament may have changed both species. Calmer wolves gained easier meals, spent less energy hunting, and survived long enough to reproduce. Generation after generation, human camps quietly filtered wolf personalities. Reduced fear became useful. Extreme aggression became costly. Evolution did the selecting. This idea sounds speculative until we look at what happened when scientists recreated a similar process using another wild canid. In 1959, Soviet geneticist Dmitri Belyaev began breeding silver foxes in Siberia. He selected for one trait: reduced fear and aggression toward humans. The foxes were not trained. In every generation, only the calmest reproduced. Within decades, their behavior began to look remarkably dog-like. They wagged their tails, sought human attention, whimpered when people left, and licked hands. Then their bodies began changing too. Some developed floppy ears, shorter snouts, curled tails, and patches of white fur. Selecting for temperament appeared to reshape physical development. Scientists often call this pattern domestication syndrome, although its exact biological cause remains debated. Behavior and appearance can be deeply connected. The earliest proto-dogs may therefore have looked different before humans deliberately bred them. Smaller, softer-faced, less threatening, and easier to tolerate nearby. Imagine seeing them beyond the flames, not fully wolves, not yet dogs, but animals suspended between two worlds. This probably did not happen in one dramatic place. Similar relationships may have formed wherever people and wolves shared landscapes and prey. For thousands of years, no one understood that domestication was happening. People simply noticed that some wolves stayed close and were useful. Wolves could hear movement beyond camp before humans could. They smelled predators, strangers, and prey while darkness still concealed everything. A tolerant wolf near camp worked like a living alarm system, reacting to danger before sleeping humans knew it was there. The partnership may then have expanded into hunting. Wolves excelled at locating prey. Humans excelled at planning, throwing weapons, and sharing food. Neither species needed to understand the arrangement. If cooperation produced more calories and fewer deaths, natural selection had reason to preserve it. Dogs became humanity's first domesticated animal. Long before agriculture, livestock, cities, writing, or metal tools transformed the world. They were already beside us when every shelter was temporary and every journey depended on weather, migrations, and distant water. When humans later began farming, dogs adapted again. Populations near agricultural communities became better than wolves at digesting starch-rich food. Their genes were responding to the human diet. Companionship was no longer only behavioral. It was becoming biological. But the most remarkable adaptation was emotional. Dogs became unusually skilled at reading human gestures, voices, attention, and gaze. When a human and a dog look into each other's eyes, oxytocin can rise in both, strengthening a bonding loop associated with trust and parental attachment. Most wolves do not naturally seek prolonged eye contact with humans. Dogs do, because generations rewarded animals capable of entering our emotional world. Even the muscles around a dog's eyes appear unusually expressive compared with wolves. Raised inner eyebrows make the face seem younger and more vulnerable. Humans may have favored dogs that communicated this way through small choices about which animals were fed, protected, and allowed near children. Domestication was not simply one species controlling another. Wolves changed human survival while humans reshaped wolf evolution. Some researchers suspect dogs improved hunting enough to give certain human groups an advantage. Better tracking meant more food, safer travel, and stronger communities. They may also have warned camps about predators and strangers, making the most vulnerable hours of darkness less dangerous for sleeping humans. Yet the partnership came with a cost. Once humans controlled breeding, appearance, and usefulness sometimes mattered more than health. Modern pugs can struggle to breathe. Dachshunds often suffer spinal disease. Some bulldogs cannot reproduce naturally. Domestication became deliberate and sometimes cruel. Still, ancient instincts remain beneath modern bodies. Dogs circle before resting, bury food, howl across distance, and twitch through dreams inherited from older hunters. Inside every Chihuahua is not a miniature wolf, but the architecture of a relationship that began when a predator judged whether a campfire was worth approaching. This is why dogs feel different from most domesticated animals. Cattle were managed. Horses were harnessed. Dogs entered the human social circle. They slept near our fires while danger moved beyond the light. They followed migrations, crossed ice, guarded children, and learned the rhythms of human fear. Eventually, the alliance became more than practical. Archaeology preserves evidence that humans had begun caring for dogs as individuals. At Bonn-Oberkassel in Germany, a grave around 14,000 years old contained a man, a woman, and a young dog buried beside them. The dog had survived a serious illness for weeks, perhaps months. It likely needed warmth, food, cleaning, and protection while offering little practical value. For Ice Age people living close to hunger, that care was expensive. Someone repeatedly chose to spend precious energy keeping a sick animal alive. That cannot be explained by hunting alone. It suggests attachment, a bond strong enough to remain even when usefulness disappeared. By then, the wolf at the edge of camp had become something new, a companion whose life mattered for more than what it could provide. The transformation may have begun without commands, leashes, or breeding plans. Just discarded bones, cautious approaches, and slightly lower levels of fear. Over immense stretches of time, tiny differences accumulated. Teeth became less threatening. Faces became easier to read. Suspicion became familiarity. Then familiarity became cooperation. Cooperation became dependence, and dependence became affection. One of evolution's strangest journeys from predator to family. Tonight, when a dog falls asleep beside a human, it completes a ritual that began beyond an Ice Age fire, when one wolf decided not to run.